The return of a legendary beat-em-up franchise should feel like a moment worth celebrating. But Double Dragon Revive isn't that moment. It's the awkward family reunion where nobody quite remembers why they came. Hot on the heels of Ninja Gaiden's excellent 2D revival Ragebound, this latest attempt to breathe life back into Billy and Jimmy Lee's legacy feels more like a tribute act than the real band reuniting for one last electrifying show. Everything, from its visuals to its sound, and especially its combat, feels strangely hollow, a mechanical recreation of something once brimming with energy. And after several hours of grinding through its streets, the realization sets in. Maybe the Double Dragon series doesn't need a revival. Maybe it needs a rest. A revival that refuses to evolve. Beat-em-ups have evolved dramatically since the 1980s. Games like Streets of Rage 4, Young Souls and Sifu have shown how the walk right and punch things formula can be layered with expressive combat, creative staging and personality. Double Dragon Revive, however, seems terrified of change. It clings so tightly to its 8-bit past that it forgets to offer anything new, delivering a side-scrolling experience that feels like a time capsule. Across 8 straightforward, non-branching stages, the structure never shifts. You fight through gangs, grab the occasional weapon, defeat a boss, and move on. I know it's competent, but the lack of dynamism is striking. There's no branching path, no experimentation, no attempt to weave mechanics together in interesting ways. Let me tell you, it's like eating plain rice, filling enough to finish, but never exciting enough to savor. Combat that hits, but never satisfies. The core combat loop gives you 4 characters to pick from: Billy, Jimmy, Marion, and the Ninja Ranzo. They all have unique animations and specials, yet mechanically they feel nearly identical once you start fighting. Normal attacks are mapped to a single button, while special and hyper moves can extend combos or clear groups of enemies. On paper, that sounds solid. In practice, it feels weightless. There's no meaningful timing window or risk-reward system. The best strategy on normal difficulty is to mash your basic attack strings and watch enemies fall. The AI occasionally throws up a shield or hyper armor to break your rhythm, but even that feels like an artificial difficulty spike rather than an engaging test of skill. The absence of air combos or advanced juggling eliminates any sense of flow. Launching an enemy only allows one dull smash attack before waiting for them to stand up again. Even when you do manage to string hits together, the physics seem to conspire against you. Enemies bounce unpredictably, ruining setups and making the whole process feel inconsistent. And then there's the input recognition. The downed enemy finisher often fails to register, leaving your character awkwardly punching the air while a thug gets up behind you. The wall bounce and wall kick mechanics are another missed opportunity. They're fun in theory, ricochet off a wall to deliver a cinematic strike, but they only work on certain walls, and there's no clear indicator of which ones qualify. It's trial and error in the middle of chaos, and the result is frustration, not mastery. Style without substance. The characters can unleash a screen-clearing special move after charging a meter built by dodges, counters, and combos. They look decent. The Lee brothers summoning energy dragons, Marion kneeing enemies into explosions, but these flourishes can't disguise how empty the core combat feels. Once the initial flash fades, you realize that even the most dramatic move is just another button press in a system with no bite. The developers clearly aimed for accessibility, but they forgot to make simplicity feel empowering. The combat doesn't evolve as you play, it just repeats. Over time, the repetition turns oppressive. What should be cathartic brawling devolves into mechanical endurance. The game's later levels rely heavily on overwhelming numbers rather than creative enemy behavior. You're swarmed from all sides, not challenged by smarter foes. It's a numbers game, not a skill game, and that distinction drains every ounce of tension from the fight. Enemies, weapons, and bosses. Enemy variety is technically strong: goons, bikers, riot shield bruisers, ranged attackers. But their designs and behaviours feel like they've been stitched together from an old template. The challenge doesn't arise from learning patterns or managing positioning, but from avoiding unfair hit trades in crowded spaces. Occasionally the game hands you a weapon, a knife, bat, or sledgehammer, but they're functionally identical, short-lived, and devoid of creativity. There's no standout gimmick or signature weapon that redefines how you play. Boss fights inject some life back into the experience. Characters like Linda, who hides atop pillars until you knock her down, or the hulking late-game mutants, who combine magic and muscle, at least force a change in pace. Yet even these moments buckle under inconsistent hit detection and imprecise controls. The infamous Chapter 7 boss exemplifies this. An exhausting, unfair endurance test that confuses relentless damage sponges for meaningful difficulty. You don't outplay the boss, you outlast its nonsense. Visuals and presentation. Double Dragon Revive's presentation sits in a strange middle ground. Character models are sharp enough, but there's no cohesive visual direction. Fire, lightning, and chai effects look like placeholders from an early build. Environments shift from gritty alleys to colourful pagodas and bland highways, but the overall world feels sterile, lacking the grime and swagger that once defined the franchise. The camera occasionally nails a dynamic angle during super moves, hinting at potential flair, but these flashes are rare. The soundtrack aims for nostalgic rock riffs with occasional remixes of classic themes. They're fine while playing, but utterly forgettable afterward. Nothing here captures the iconic energy of the old arcade anthems. The sound design, too, feels underbaked. Punches land with a muffled thud rather than a crack. Without that tactile impact, the fights lack rhythm and texture. Storytelling fares even worse. The plot is paper-thin. Returning villains, Willie and Raymond, use black magic and military tech to create chaos, and our heroes step in to stop them. The writing is inert, neither campy enough to amuse, nor serious enough to engage. Previous revivals, like Double Dragon Neon, succeeded precisely because they embraced absurdity. Revive plays it straight, and that's the problem. It confuses restraint for maturity, draining the experience of personality. Technical issues and feel. A good beat-em-up lives or dies by its feel. Responsiveness is everything. The crispness of a punch, the timing of a dodge, the satisfaction of a perfect counter. Revive stumbles here repeatedly. Directional inputs occasionally reverse for no reason, interrupting combos. Dodges have inconsistent invincibility frames, sometimes leaving you vulnerable even when you time them correctly. These little inconsistencies pile up over time until you realize you're fighting the controls as much as the enemies. Even visually, the animation blending feels stiff. Characters snap between states instead of flowing naturally. There's no sense of weight transfer, no subtle recoil or anticipation that gives hits believability. It feels canned and mechanical, an imitation of movement, not movement itself. The result, even when you're winning, it rarely feels satisfying. Stages without soul. While the game takes players through a range of settings, from colourful streets to industrial towers, most of them are painfully generic. A Japanese pagoda level stands out briefly thanks to a clever perspective shift halfway through, but the rest blur together. A highway level with a wrestling ring sounds fun, yet it plays out exactly as expected. Even the environmental interactions, like knocking enemies into hazards, are too limited to add flavour. The visual storytelling that once made Double Dragon's cityscapes iconic is missing. These places feel lifeless, functional, and forgettable. Nostalgia without purpose. Revive is caught between two identities. It wants to appeal to fans of the old arcade games while drawing in a new audience, but it misunderstands both. Veterans will find it too shallow and unambitious. Newcomers will find it too stiff and dated. Nostalgia alone can't sustain an experience when the mechanics feel this flat. Earlier modernizations like Double Dragon Gaiden and Neon succeeded because they reimagined the franchise's DNA, either by leaning into parody or by refreshing the art style. Revive plays it safe and ends up with no identity at all. Even developers from past Double Dragon projects have criticized it. Former artists described it as cheap and disrespectful to the series, calling out its bland visuals and lack of martial arts flair. Those criticisms ring true when you play it. The game feels stripped of personality, like a photocopy of something once vibrant. Double Dragon Revive is not an unplayable game. It's a profoundly uninspired one. Everything technically works. Enemies spawn, punches connect, levels progress. But there's no spark, no reinvention, no moment that makes you sit up and say, yes, this is why the series needed to return. It's competent but soulless, polished in all the wrong ways and careless in the ones that matter. Revive feels like someone describing Double Dragon from memory, correct in detail, wrong in spirit. It ticks the boxes of what the franchise is supposed to be, yet misses the rhythm, the swagger, and the raw energy that made it special. Compared to modern peers, it looks and feels outdated. Compared to its own history, it feels empty. For longtime fans desperate to see Billy and Jimmy back in action, this revival might scratch a brief nostalgic itch. But anyone hoping for a genuine reinvention, a modern brawler with the style, personality, and grit of the classics, will find only a hollow echo. Revival implies new life. Double Dragon. Revive delivers only movement. In the end, it's less a resurrection and more an autopsy, an examination of what once was, presented without the beating heart that made it worth remembering.